Hi guys, before I begin the episode, thank you very much to Magic Mind, who billed themselves as the world's first productivity drink, and they are also in fact my very first sponsor. Oh my god, feel very professional, and I'll let you know how I felt about the product later on in the episode. Thank you very much to Magic Mind. Croeso, Difda, Bynachtin, Gia Hwitch, Fulcha, Daymat. Welcome to the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast. I am your humble host, Sian Esther Powell, and I'm going to be taking you on a journey through all the myths and legends of the 6 Celtic nations. That's Wales, Cornwall, Brittany, Isle of Man, Scotland and Ireland. Welcome. Right guys, before we begin in earnest, I've got something quite serious to admit to. I don't really know how to begin this, but I lied to you all. I said that the last episode was going to be a 2-parter, but I completely overestimated how busy myself and all of my friends are at the moment. So I wasn't able to get my lovely friend that I was planning on having on the last episode. So hopefully I can be a lot more organised in the future and get a little roster of potential guests that I might want to have on the podcast. But this is just maybe. I'm not, this has never been a podcast with guests on. So I can't have any bloody old person on here, can I? Anyway, we're not going to be talking about Cornish foods today. I told you that the last episode would be a 2-parter, and it won't be. So I really hate to admit this to you, and I know that you're all going to hate it, and you're just going to have to bear with me. I'm so sorry, but I'm just going to have to talk to you today about Welsh mythology. I'm sorry. We're just going to have to do it. We're just going to have to knuckle down and just, grin and bear it, I'm afraid. And I can't remember if I've ever mentioned this, but my love... maybe I have, maybe I haven't. I don't know, I've got a brain like a sieve. But my lovely friend, CCJ Ellis, or Rowan Ellis, has written a book, Welsh Monsters and Mythical Beasts. So Rowan is an illustrator, and they've created this just gorgeous book of Welsh mythical creatures, beautiful illustrations of those mythical creatures. And I think I have said many times before that some of the challenges that I face as a folklorist and storyteller today is that there aren't a lot of visual representations of characters and figures from myths and legends and folkloric creatures. So you're sort of relying on the same images again and again and again. And I'm not kind of artistic enough in that way to be drawing and painting creatures. So everyone that's ever contacted me that's an artist that has said, oh, your show has helped me, draw different creatures and stuff like that, and there has been a few of you. God bless you. Gods bless you. Whatever god or gods you believe in, bless you. Thank you so much. You're doing God's work. Why has this become so religious? Anyway, you're doing great work. Thank you so much, because it really is a challenge when there's a real lack of visual representation for these creatures. So we definitely rely on Brian Froud and a few select artists again and again. So Rowan's book here is just absolutely gorgeous and incredible. So it's Welsh Monsters and Mythical Beasts, written and illustrated by CCJ Ellis. And I was honoured, and I mean this, I was truly honoured to have been asked to write the introduction to this book. So I'm going to read you a couple paragraphs from it. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, and you should absolutely get on Amazon or whatever bookshop or whatever near you and get this book, because I'm not biased, but it's gorgeous. It's such a beautiful book of Welsh mythical creatures and just stunning illustrations. I love Ellis's style. So yes, please get this book. Okay, there are a lot of really gnarly background noises that I'm hearing already. I'm a fidgeter. I'm gonna come out and say it. I'm a fidgeter. I move around a lot. I move around and fidget a lot in my seat. But I'm really sorry for those horrible background noises. You'll have to bear with me. I still, unfortunately, have long COVID or post-viral fatigue, which has been hammering me. 5 months later, I'm still not very well. I've had my B12 shot yesterday, my first one, so I'm getting a loading dose of B12 shots, 3 a week for 2 weeks, and then every 3 months. And that's essentially, I think B12 is something to do with like your white blood cell count, isn't it? And iron, I don't know, someone smarter will be able to chime in and tell me what it actually is. But basically my body's not producing it, or not taking it in, so now I need to get I need to get it put into my body. So I'm hoping that will alleviate some of the fatigue. So I'm saying all this basically because I'm in a bit of a strange mood today. I'm very, very tired, but also I've got the energy, weird mental energy, to do the podcast, so I'm gonna do it. But if I do have lots of weird noises in the background, I'll try and edit out as much as I can, but I'm not gonna spend hours and hours and hours editing. I'll spend a bit on it, and I love this show, and I'm so thankful to all of you listening. But yeah, we're just gonna go with the flow today, I'm afraid. Well, we do that every day. We do that every time, don't we? But bear with me. Thank you. God bless. You guys seriously have no idea how many ums I edit out. I'm a big I don't know. I can't help it. I know I leave a few in. I leave a cheeky few little morsels in there to give you a hint of the real chaos behind. But I have to take out so many ums and weird dramatic breaths. You're welcome. My friends, I'm back. You never knew that I left, but I did, in fact. I went to go and get Bailey dog food and then came back, and Dad was watching Discovering Science Fiction on film. So I had to watch it. I had to stop and watch it. We couldn't figure out when the programme was made, but the newest film was Minority Report in 2002, and I'm really shocked that there was no Arrival, no Interstellar, no what's the other one? Martian. There was, really great films that have come out in the last 10 years. God, I hope so anyway, my goodness. So I think the programme had to be at least 10, 15 years old, or they just had very kind of older taste. But yeah, I love my science fiction. I think I missed programmes like that, actually. I really enjoy watching other people discuss their favourite films and why they like them so much and stuff like that. Anyway, Welsh mythology. Finally, we'll get on to Welsh mythology. So I'm going to read you just the first 2 or 3 paragraphs of my introduction. Not the whole thing, because you must go and buy the book Welsh Monsters and Mythical Beasts, written and illustrated by CCJ Ellis, because it is amazing. But this is what I wrote. Human beings have always crafted, shared and adapted stories of fantastical creatures and monsters. Sometimes we share stories that are intended to scare, to keep children away from those hidden, beguiling places where they might find themselves in danger, were they ever to venture there alone. Sometimes we share stories to explain and rationalise things that are a mystery to us. These stories can help us make sense of strange phenomena like lights over the moors, unfamiliar shapes in the trees, disappearances of neighbours, and the sounds heard alone in the forest that make your hair stand on end. And then there are the stories of creatures that have evolved so many times since their genesis that they have become different beasts entirely. Local folk heroes battling giants become Christian saints besting the devil. This is one of the things that I love most about folklore, mythology and legends. We are always changing the stories we tell, emphasising the parts that fascinate us and disregarding those that don't. There should never be a correct version of a story or a single description of a monster. To some people, a fairy is a sweet, benevolent creature with glittering wings and a tiny magical wand. To others, a fairy is something to be frightened of, a creature from another world to respect, and if at all possible, avoid. So it's just the first couple paragraphs there of my introduction to the book. Not even half of what I did right. So check out the book. It's, again, absolutely gorgeous. But it does lead me into talking about our topic today, which is Welsh fairies, otherwise known as the Tylwyth Teg. So much like discussions on other types of similar creatures, especially the Cornish Pisci, or the Pobl Fian, the little folk of Cornwall, what is a fairy? Because it's not one single thing. So the Tylwyth Teg are almost akin to fairy. It's an umbrella term, like a classification of creature, with lots of creatures coming under this classification of Tylwyth Teg or fairy. So where do these Tylwyth Teg live? There are those that live in the mountains. There are those that live in freshwater lakes or seawater. There are those that live in the dark places deep in the forests. There are those that live under the earth in the old mines and caves. And there are those that live in an other world entirely. The Gwyllion, the mountain fairies, seen only at twilight, wary of human beings who travel far too close to their homes, far too late in the day, in that period in time we know as the gloaming, when day turns to night. The Gwr Nun, beautiful water fairies, luring unsuspecting travellers beneath lakes, and sometimes choosing to mate with humans, leaving their children until they grow, realise what they are, and return to the water, never to be seen again. The Ellyllon, the Welsh elves, wild hair and strong bodies, fierce and proud and true, beautiful but frightening, bestowing gifts upon those they favour, and waging war against those they don't. And the Coblenai, who live far below the ground in the old mines, and those most beautiful and elusive, the creatures that lived in Annwn, the other world, accomplished heroes, magicians, warriors, musicians, artists, and lovers. These, the fair folk of Wales, the Tylwyth Teg of Cymru, when there was more magic in the air, in the earth, in the water, when people believed in such things, when the whole lands of Wales were enchanted. And Bwbacod, the Welsh hobgoblins, lived inside our homes, when we left water outside our windows and fresh milk as thanks, when we left overripe fruit, when we were friends and when we were enemies, carrying knives of iron and silver to ward against attacks, carrying charms to protect our babies, for this was still the time of the Plentyn Newid, the changeling, those poor, sorrowful, plaintive creatures belonging to neither world, not quite human and no longer fairy. 'Tis rare indeed these days to see a member of the Tylwyth Teg, for those that once were have retreated far, far away. So as you can see, there were so many types of fairy in Welsh mythology, and they occupy a lot of different spaces. They do a lot of different things. There's a lot of different descriptions for them. They act in different ways. I get the same feeling when I discussed the Pobl Fian of Cornwall, the little folk of Cornwall, and all the different types of Pisky folk, and, you know, where they live and what they do and what they look like. Because it kind of just gives you this impression of this really, like, enchanted landscape where everywhere you go there's the potential for a magical creature to live. And I think it's the reason why, I'm going to mention it again, it's the reason why I love video games like The Witcher so much. It's taken loads of different cultures, but it's just every landscape has so many different types of creatures. Every village has its own stories. And in the same way that Geralt has his silver sword for monsters, it was said that you should have carried an iron or silver knife to ward off the various types of fairy attack that you might encounter roaming around the lands of Wales. Which brings me on to my idea that I posed in my last episode And I'm going to do it again. So I have been sponsored by Magic Mind, which are the first productivity drink in the world. That's kind of what they're billing themselves as. And they're these tiny little plastic bottles you get of a green sort of smoothie-like drink, except it's not a smoothie at all. It's quite a thin texture, but it's got matcha, it's got turmeric, it's got like lion's mane mushrooms or something like that, all of these really kind of fantasy sounding ingredients. And I posed the idea the last time that they should actually change all the packaging to tiny little potion bottles, because if you're going to be like if you're going to tout yourself as like a productivity drink, then I am just obsessed with this idea of like just little potion bottles giving you like +10 fortitude and all this other stuff. Anyway, I said the exact same thing last time because I just think it would be such a fun idea. I now want to roam around Wales and Cornwall with like a leather satchel that's full of like tiny little potion bottles. Anyway, I personally really like the drink. It tastes really nice. It's a very acquired taste. I don't think it will be for everyone. But I really enjoyed it. I love turmeric, so it has a little bit of spice to it. It's like a sort of a thin green smoothie. How else to describe it? I don't know. But I certainly think it gave me a bit of pep in my step. I haven't had it for a while now. I think I had the box like a month or two ago. But I really liked it, and I would have it again. Send me some more, please. Because I have been dealing, with pretty bad symptoms of long COVID. They haven't been nice. I'm jerking, I'm twitching, I'm fatigued, lots of nasty things. So very brain fogged. So it's not curing any of those things for me, but I did, and it is never, it hasn't said it's going to do that. My goodness, it's not medicine. But I did find that it did kind of give me a bit more energy. And I don't know if that is a total placebo effect or what, but I did find that I like the taste of them. They're like really fresh taste, a little bit spicy. It's got a bit of a kick in it. You have it alongside your morning coffee. And I did like the taste, and I did feel like I did have a bit more oomph in the day. So yeah, I would try it again, because I think I had the box with 15 in, so I only did it sort of 15 days in a row, but they do have boxes that have 30, so you can try it for longer. I do find sometimes like I crave it a little bit, like in my mouth. Like I could do with one of those like little shots right now, little spicy shots. So if you want to give it a go, you can go to Magic Mind /Celtic, and I think that gives you a little bit of discount there. And I think you can also get another discount with the code Celtic20. I also get the newsletter, and they do seem to do a lot of discounts kind of periodically, which is good because by itself it is quite expensive, but they always seem to have discounts on, and you can use my discounts if you want. So yeah, if you want to give it a go, then do it. If you don't, then don't, my lovely friends. It's your body. So let's have a little bit more of a deep dive into the different types of Welsh fairies. So the Gwellion, the mountain fairies, were said to have a sort of like hag-like appearance. But what's really great in CCJ Ellis's book is that they've created this really lovely image, almost like a goat-like type figure. And this is what I love. Like, there is no one version that is correct for any of these stories, right? My little stories that I just did then, those are my own little interpretations. There is no fact when it comes to folklore. Folklore and storytelling is ever changing and evolving, and different storytellers will have different elements of the story that they bring up, different elements that they downplay, different stories that they tell to begin with, some stories they won't tell, whatever. I've repeated this stuff very often, but stories are so varied and diverse and ever changing, and there is no one correct version. But I love seeing artists' depictions of these creatures and their descriptions of them, and how different people, like I said, have slightly different definitions and all this sort of stuff. So, like I said, there is no correct version of these myths, in my opinion. Some people might disagree with me, and they're like, no, you must classify them very diligently. But in my brain, I just think, whatever. That's very academic of me, isn't it? Whatever. That's my motto now, guys. Whatever. The Gwellion, the mountain fairies, yeah, they're said to have like a hag-like appearance, but that they'll come down every now and again from the mountain if there's a storm, and they might settle in an inn or a tavern or a home by the fire, but you should be like ultra super respectful of them, right, and not bother them at all, but you should kind of act as a hospitable host and make sure that they have the shelter and they have some food and drink. God, there's something so great about that mental image. Let's explore that for a minute, shall we? Great storm outside. It's whipping the trees into a frenzy. Cracks of lightning flash across the sky. Thunder looms above. On a lonely mountain path, a single Gwellion makes her way down the mountain track. She gains some power from the storm, some sense of urgency, but she is also frightened by it and seeking shelter and solace. She is putting her trust into human folk, which she does not do very often. Down, down, down the mountain she goes, and she walks along the valley floor, darkened by the night, until she sees light in the distance. This is a village. There are many houses, and there's even a pub. She makes her way bravely onwards, trusting that those inside might help her. She knocks on one door, but is shunned. She knocks on another door, but is ignored. On the third door she knocks, tired now, very wary, and starting to wonder why she bothered at all. The door opens. She locks eyes with a young girl who is frightened to begin with, but knows her manners. She opens the door wide, and the Gwellion enters. There ahead is a burning fire. She trudges in through the small home and rests her weary bones by the crackling flames, her back turned to the family within, and without a word, the young girl places a dish of water beside her, and then a small plate with a little Welsh cake in the middle. No words are exchanged, but there is an understanding there. There is a knowing of what this means. All night the storm rages, and she sleeps beside the fire, safe and trusting. And on this occasion her trust was not unfounded. In the morning, when the storm has abated, she finally turns round. The family are there, quietly eating their breakfast, careful not to look her in the eye. But they know when she approaches, stands before their table, and watches them carefully, remembering each small details of their faces. And there is an understanding that, for this family at least, if ever they were to become lost on the mountain, they would find safe passage home. It would transpire that the parents would never need this blessing. They travelled very little. But the girl, once she was grown, realised that her kindness as a child brought her safety in one of her darkest moments on the mountain track. That same mountain track that the Gwellion made her way down all those years ago. But that is a story for another day. Have been said to attack human beings as well, or at least humans were wary of possible attacks from these creatures. So again, the iron and silver knife. And then there's the fairy type creatures that live in the water maidens, the Gwragedd Annwn, or simply ladies of the lake. There's another lovely book I've been relying heavily on when doing this reading and research, and that is Peter Stevenson's Welsh Folk Tales, and there's lovely illustrations in that book as well. And in this book it tells the story of one of these maidens of the water, and how a young farmer spots her in the middle of the water, falls in love, and then she's like, no thanks, sir, and tries to give her all these different types of bread, and then he finally gets really good bread, and she's like, oh, do you know what, all right then, let's have a go of it. But she tells him, you hit me 3 times or I suffer 3 unfortunate blows, and it's bye-bye, sir, goodbye, no thank you, there's no second chance after that. And then, of course, it transpires through a series of events that she receives these 3 unfortunate blows, but probably not in the way that he would have imagined, because he's not striking her in anger or anything like that. But they are kind of moments of sort of tense moments where he's kind of scolding her, but she's not of this world, you know, she's not human, so she's not kind of operating on the same wavelength as him, really. And then they end up having 3 sons who then become very well-known healers. So that was a very condensed version, because I don't want to just do a whole, you know, I don't want to just detract away from you buying and reading that book, because it's a really lovely book of Welsh folk tales. Also lots of tales of mermaids as well. I've also been reading the Snowdonia Folk Tales by Eric Madden, and that's got lovely illustrations by Sue Maynall in that book as well. And there's a really great story about, it's called Fairy Ointment, and there's like a moment where an old couple are looking for a maidservant, so they go to the village where all the young people kind of just stand in a row who want work. And it just made me think of when I was reading Mort. Some of you know I've been on my real Discworld binge lately. And you know what? I've loved them all. I've really, really enjoyed them all. But yeah, Mort was great. I really loved Mort. And that scene where, dear of him, he's just standing in the middle of the village, like with his poor father. His father that loves him, but like, you know, can't verbally tell him that. And he's the last one to be picked. And then obviously Death picks him as his servant and apprentice. It's just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And this is what the best stories do. They paint a real picture for you, you know, they colour it in with all the different colours, and they make it feel vibrant and real and alive around you. So as I mentioned before, the Bubacod, or Bubacod, I'm so sorry for any of my pronunciations, okay? I'm trying my best, but again, if you're a Welsh listener and you're like wincing throughout this, please can you DM me with a voice note on how I pronounce any of them if I've got them wrong. Thank you. That would actually be so appreciated and very helpful. But yeah, that's where you got the Bubacod, which is sort of like the English Hobbes, really, that lived inside the home. And I've mentioned before there are stories about Cornish piskies that help inside the home as well. But if you give them a piece of clothing, they'll bugger off forever. But yeah, you have these same types of creatures in Welsh folklore as well, living inside the home, helping out with chores, as long as they're being given like water and shelter and stuff, you know, as well. There's that kind of mutual relationship there. And I love that in these types of stories, that idea of like this mutual relationship, this friendship, this kind of equal, it's not transactional, but it's like, you know, I'm going to help you, but you're going to help me, and we can live in harmony together. Yeah, I love it. And I've talked a lot about the knockers and Cornish folklore, which then when Cornish miners emigrated to, say, everywhere around the world basically, but definitely in America, and then you get the Tommy knocker. Well, the Welsh cobbler nigh and mine gremlins and goblins and mine fairies in Welsh folklore are very much part of that as well. In fact, everywhere around the world that had mines has some sort of folklore around, you know, the creatures that lived inside the mines. And then you have the Ellyllon, the elves, which seem to be a little bit different than the kind of classic Scandinavian type elves, or I guess the sort of creatures that you also get in the Mabinogi, because they are the last ones I was sort of describing, the ones from the other world. So it's a little bit confusing figuring out the different distinctions between these creatures, because of course different folklorists would have been collecting different stories, different people would have had different belief systems around these different creatures. So as I say, I don't think there is one correct version of any of these stories, but I've tried my best to include a bunch of them to give you a little taste of what the fairies, or the Tylwyth Teg of Wales, are. A little bit carried away with my Gwellion character, and actually I might do a bigger story on that one day. I really enjoyed that. I have really enjoyed this episode. I enjoy all of them. But this one, I've really loved it. I've loved finding like the different bits of music and sound effects. I've loved the different storytelling sections. So thank you very much for joining me on this joyous occasion for me. I've been very, very very fatigued today, actually, very tired. So delighted that I found my love of storytelling and folklore at the end of the day there, and I'm going to bed on a very good note. So thank you very much once again to Magic Mind for being my sponsor, but mostly thank you for listening to my podcast, and thank you for the continued support I receive from people. It really does mean the world to me. I get messages, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on email, on TikTok, and it's insane to me that there are all these wonderful people out there listening to my little show, listening to me rabbit on, because it feels like I am just chatting to a bunch of friends about myths and legends, and I love that that's what some of you end up telling me it feels like as well. I love when people tell me that you listen to the show with your children, or you listen to it with your friends, or you listen to it when you're walking your dog or you're doing your chores, you have it on in the background when you're working. All of these little moments that my show exists in your lives is a huge, huge honour. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope you have a lovely day. And see you next month with some spooky Halloweeny stuff. I love Halloween, so very excited for the October episode. Thank you for listening. I am your host, Sian Esther Powell, and that has been another episode of the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast. If you would like to find it elsewhere on the interwebs, you can also find me on Twitter at Celtic Myths Pod, on Facebook under Celtic Myths and Legends Podcast, on Patreon at Celtic Myths Pod, as well as Instagram at Celtic_Sian, and also CelticSian.co.uk. Thank you, Muraz, Diolch, Tachpalet, Guramahagat, Trugare, Guramayed. Thank you, and speak to you next time. Thank you.